Most people will never travel. Not because they are lazy, not because they are stupid, and not because they truly can't afford it. They never travel because they keep waiting. Waiting for more money, waiting for more experience, waiting for the perfect moment. But the truth is, that perfect moment almost never comes. Years pass. Life becomes repetitive. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. And slowly, traveling turns into something distant, something you only watch through other people's videos. But what if I told you that your first trip doesn't need to be expensive? What if the biggest thing stopping you isn't money, but fear? Because most people imagine travel completely wrong. They think you need luxury hotels, business class flights, perfect plans, thousands of dollars. But some of the best trips start with almost nothing. A cheap backpack, a last-minute ticket, a small amount of money, and the decision to finally go. This video is not for rich travelers. It's not for influencers pretending every trip is perfect. This is for normal people. People who have never traveled before. People who feel stuck. People who want to see the world but genuinely don't know where to start. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to begin. Even if you have no experience. Even if you don't have much money. Even if traveling feels impossible right now. Because the world is far more accessible than most people realize. And today, we're going to prove it. The biggest obstacle to travel is rarely money. It's uncertainty. People are afraid of getting lost, afraid of airports, afraid of booking the wrong ticket, afraid of being alone, afraid of making mistakes. And honestly, that fear is normal. Your first trip will feel uncomfortable, not because you're doing something wrong, but because everything is new. New country, new language, new systems, new people. Your brain naturally sees unfamiliar things as danger. That's why so many people stay inside their comfort zone forever. It feels safer. But comfort has a hidden price. When every day looks the same, time starts moving faster. Weeks become months. Months become years. And one day, people realize they spent most of their life waiting instead of living. Travel changes that. Not because it magically fixes your life, but because it reminds you that the world is bigger than your routine. The first step is always the hardest. That's why your first trip should not be some giant dream adventure. Don't start with a 6-country trip across the world. Start small. A nearby city, a cheap country, a weekend flight. Because the goal of your first trip is not luxury. The goal is confidence. Once you survive your first airport, your first hotel, your first solo moment in another country, everything changes. Travel stops feeling impossible and starts feeling real. Now let's talk about the thing everyone worries about the most: money. Most people think travel automatically means spending thousands of dollars, but the reality is very different. Modern travel has never been cheaper than it is today. The problem is that most people only see the expensive version of travel online. Luxury resorts, infinity pools, first-class flights, perfect Instagram vacations. But that's not how most real travelers actually travel. Some people cross entire countries with the price of a new phone, while others spend less traveling for a month than they spent living at home. Because smart travel is not about how much money you have, it's about how you use it. The first thing you need to understand is this: flights are usually the biggest expense, which means learning how to find cheap tickets changes everything. Never search for flights only on airline websites. Use comparison platforms, search different dates, and stay flexible. Sometimes changing your flight by just one day can save hundreds of dollars. And if you're serious about budget travel, stop trying to travel during the most expensive seasons, like summer holidays, Christmas, or major events. That's when prices explode. Traveling slightly before or after peak season is one of the easiest ways to save money. The second big expense is accommodation, and this is where beginners waste huge amounts of money. You do not need expensive hotels for your first trip, especially if you're barely going to stay inside the room. Hostels are one of the best options for beginners, not only because they're cheap, but because you meet other travelers. And when you're traveling for the first time, that matters. You realize you're not alone. You meet people from different countries, different lifestyles, different stories, and suddenly the world feels much bigger than before. There are also platforms where people stay for free or volunteer in exchange for accommodation. Some people work a few hours a day and live in another country almost for free. And honestly, that lifestyle sounds impossible until you realize thousands of normal people already do it. Then comes food, another thing people overspend on. Tourists often eat in the worst places possible. Restaurants directly next to famous attractions are usually overpriced and average. The best food is often where locals eat: markets, small cafes, street food, and supermarkets. In many countries, buying food from local stores instead of restaurants can cut your daily budget in half. And here's something important nobody tells beginners. Your first trip does not need to be perfect. Trying to make everything perfect is exactly what makes travel feel expensive and stressful. Missed train, wrong street, cheap room, awkward moment, that's part of the experience. And years later, those imperfect moments usually become the stories you remember most. One of the biggest myths about travel is that you need a lot of equipment. Expensive backpacks, professional cameras, special clothes, and travel gadgets. But most of that is unnecessary, especially for your first trip. The truth is simple. The lighter you travel, the easier everything becomes. Too many beginners overpack because they're afraid they might need something just in case, and then they spend the entire trip dragging heavy luggage through airports, buses, train stations, and crowded streets. Minimalism gives you freedom. For your first trip, you only need the essentials: comfortable clothes, comfortable shoes, basic hygiene products, your documents, a phone, a charger, and a power bank. That's enough. Nobody cares if you wear the same hoodie twice, and nobody cares if your backpack isn't expensive. Most fears only exist in your head. And honestly, travel becomes much more enjoyable when you stop trying to impress people. Now, let's talk about documents and safety, because this is one area where you should never be careless. Before traveling anywhere, check visa requirements, make digital copies of your passport, save emergency contacts, and buy basic travel insurance. Insurance feels boring until something goes wrong: a missed flight, lost luggage, or a medical problem. One small issue abroad can suddenly become extremely expensive. That's why smart travelers prepare for problems before they happen, not after. Another important thing is learning the basics of the place you're visiting. Not because you need to become an expert, but because respect matters. Learn a few basic greetings, cultural rules, common scams, and how transportation works. Even small effort changes how people treat you. And the biggest surprise for many first-time travelers is this: the world is usually much friendlier than they expected. Yes, bad experiences happen sometimes, but most people you meet while traveling are just normal people living their lives. Some will help you, some will guide you, and some may even become friends. And once you realize that, travel becomes far less scary, because the world stops feeling like a dangerous, unknown place and starts feeling human. Now comes one of the most important questions. Where should you actually go first? And honestly, most beginners make this way harder than it needs to be. They spend months trying to find the perfect country, the perfect weather, the perfect budget, and the perfect experience. But the perfect first destination doesn't exist. What matters is choosing a place that feels realistic for you. Your first trip is not about impressing social media. It's about building momentum. That's why simpler is usually better. Choose a destination that is affordable, relatively safe, beginner-friendly, and easy to navigate. For some people, that might be Southeast Asia. Countries like Thailand or Vietnam are popular because daily life can be cheaper than in many Western countries. Street food is affordable, transport is cheap, hostels are everywhere, and there's already a huge traveler community there. For others, Europe might feel easier, especially if short flights are available from your country. Sometimes your first successful trip is just a weekend in another city, and that still counts. A lot of people underestimate how powerful small trips can be, because once your brain realizes, I survived this, everything changes. Airports stop feeling terrifying, booking hotels becomes normal, and you stop overthinking every little detail. Confidence grows through action, not through watching more videos. And there's something else beginners rarely understand. Your first trip will probably not go perfectly. Something unexpected will happen. You'll get confused, maybe you'll miss a train, or maybe your plans will change completely. And that's okay. Travel teaches flexibility, problem solving, and independence. And those lessons are often more valuable than the destination itself. Because eventually, you stop traveling just to escape life and start traveling because you genuinely feel alive while doing it. That's when travel becomes part of who you are, not just a vacation, but a completely different way of seeing the world. If you've watched this far, you probably already feel something shifting inside you. Because this was never just about travel. It was about something deeper. The way we live, the way we wait, and the way we postpone our lives. Most people don't realize how much time they lose just preparing to live. I'll travel when I have more money. I'll go when I have more free time. I'll start when everything is perfect. But life doesn't wait for perfect conditions, and neither does the world. Travel is just one example, but it teaches a bigger lesson. You don't need permission to start. You don't need to be fully ready, and you don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to begin. Because the truth is, nobody ever feels 100% ready. Not for travel, not for new jobs, and not for big changes in life. Readiness is something that appears after you start, not before. And the same applies to your first trip. It will feel uncertain, uncomfortable, and maybe even overwhelming at times. But that's exactly how growth feels. And one day, you'll look back at your first trip and realize it wasn't really about the destination at all. It was about the moment you decided to stop waiting. That's the real beginning. So if you're sitting there thinking, I want to travel, but I don't know how, you already know more than enough. You don't need another video, more research, or more time. You just need a decision. Start small. Start simple. Start imperfect. But start. Because the world is not as far away as it feels. It's already waiting for you. And your first step is closer than you think.